So hello everyone. Thank you. So hello everyone and welcome to another webinar within the project Child Education in Central Asia, titled International Training Program on Medical Training and Education in Digital Era, Perspectives and Challenges. This is the training program for postgraduate participants who are dealing with medical training and education and would like to improve their skills and knowledge in use of digital technologies for modern medical training and education. Today, we are with the last of the webinars within these training programs. Just briefly, the Child Central Asia project has an aim to support modernization, professionalization, and internationalization of postgraduate training in 8 universities of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan in field of pediatric surgery, and child neuropsychiatry. Also, these webinars are organized in collaboration with European Distance and E-Learning Network. Just allow me to briefly say that this year we are celebrating 30 years of serving modernization in education in Europe, and we are very happy to be able to continuously share knowledge and improve understanding among professionals in distance and e-learning, and to promote policy and practice across whole Europe and beyond. The title of today's webinar is Collaborative Online Trusted Relationships for Multicultural Exchange. The issue of virtual mobility and virtual exchange is not new. It's definitely present for a number of years, but maybe we can say that pandemic has fostered these two possibilities on a higher level than before. And internationalization is something definitely which is important for all educational institutions. Today we have experts who will talk about this and give their expertise and practice on this topic. I can only say that maybe internalization and virtual mobility has been given the positive wind and push actually with pandemic, which served as a kind of catalyst for their improvement and wider presence. And today's speakers, we have Irina Volungevičienė, President of Eden Digital Europe, Director of Institute for Study Innovation at Vitatus Magnus Universities in Lithuania. We have Elena Caldirola, Director of E-Learning Center of University Pavia in Italy. We have Francesca Helm, researcher at Department of Politics, Law and International Studies at the University of Padua in Italy, and Wim van Petegem, professor at Leuven, Belgium, and also from Belgium, and also editor-in-chief of Eurodel, the research publication, which is in the field of European distance learning, and also part of the Eden. So I wish to thank my speakers today. I will stop sharing my presentation, and each of them will have introductory session. So now I'm inviting first Irina to start, and you can share your screen. So Irina, please.
Dear colleagues, dear participants of this webinar, it is my pleasure to discuss today with you the topic of virtual mobility and internationalization. Actually, two very important topics for research and practice that opened in a new context, in a new paradigm, and are going through the shift The reason for that is, of course, the last 2 years working online, but at the same time, the potential that higher education institutions see for international, interinstitutional collaboration. I will start my short presentation to share with you the research that has been going on about the concept of virtual mobility. It is not a new concept, as you may see. Researchers from different countries and even regions of the world starting discussing it, but Europe here has a say and has many publications and research books and case studies dedicated to the important area that was identified already in the beginning of this century. It would be interesting to note that here we have Professor Wim van Petegem from KU Leuven, the university, among the pioneers of this research. Also, we had dissertations published in our university about the developments, the formats, the potential, and the impact of virtual mobility upon students, teachers, curriculum, and institutions. I will come back about this at the end of my presentation. I decided to share with you a couple of very short cases, and then to talk with you about the impact of virtual mobility that actually was proved through research implemented, I would say, in the last 10, 11 years. I really prefer myself and share with you the proposal of the definition of virtual and blended mobility suggested initially by the European Commission in 2011. You see the reference document, but then adapted and approved by this consortia of institutions with logos that you see in the slides, with whom we had the pleasure to collaborate on the European projects about virtual mobility development and implementation. And definition says that in this case, it is set of information and communication technology supported activities organized at institutional level that realize or facilitate international collaborative experiences in a context of teaching and or learning, with a hint that sometimes it may go only in a non-formal or even informal way. We, of course, established our characteristics of virtual mobility, and we characterized it from the perspective of the number of involved actors in the process. So virtual mobility opens possibilities for collaboration of more than two higher education institutions. We focused on higher education because in physical, our traditional, if we may call it, mobility, usually a person travels from one country to another country, and this is based on bilateral agreement between two higher education institutions. So definitely virtual mobility expands it. Teachers and students as well experience enhancement and facilitation. And I will give you short examples when students staying in one country and being in their home universities in the same semester participate in via virtual mobility way in 2 or even 3 universities at the same time. My initial examples will be focusing on 3 types of virtual mobility: multilateral collaboration in formal studies, multilateral collaboration in non-formal studies, and bilateral collaboration in formal studies. The first is most complex, and the last one is the simplest, and maybe the second step to be mainstreamed in Europe. So I will start with the first. That was one of the most complicated cases that I was involved in, when actually 3 higher education institutions agreed to develop one formal learning course for bachelor study program, and 13 teachers from 6 higher education institutions developed one course. The first challenge is when you start such, I would say, really multilateral collaboration in formal settings, is agreement on the learning outcomes. If I could give you an example, it would be this table when 6 higher education institutions divide curriculum into equal parts, following, of course, learning outcome and assessment strategy, and share development of learning design and learning curriculum in the format of submodules or topics, and then accompany the same group of students that could be, of course, by nature international, through one semester in one course. You can imagine such rich experience, and it is existent, and it is quite a successful example. That happened a long time ago when we had still old audience type video conferences, meeting students every Friday from groups of national participants, and then working in an asynchronous way in Moodle. Testimonies and impact of such experiences show that it's great pleasure for students to enrich, to enhance their academic exchange and also social cultural exchange. A similar project was carried on when, again, 4 universities in this case developed a study program consisting of 10 or 11 modules together, again, in multilateral collaboration. And this collaboration proved such huge impact that teachers and students appreciated collaborative mode in curriculum designing, in virtual mobility studies, and in the end, all universities benefited from the whole list of modules developed together. So each university receives a new updated master program. And of course, it continues in different ways and modalities in meetings, visits, and other social, cultural, and academic exchange. This is an evident result of such case studies. The second type of multilateral collaboration in non-formal studies is an easier format where people meet in projects, usually develop a joint course together, again, inviting several universities, even from outside consortium, to participate in course development, and then, of course, pilot the courses and issue certificates as non-formal course certificates for the participants of the course. I know that I can be confident showing here the names and signatures of people involved, because that was very favorable experience as well. However, each such experience of collaborative international collaboration in international settings has much wider impact, like experience gained, lessons learned, feedback, testimonies, trusted network development, and what is more important, understanding what are the steps needed for higher education institution to prepare for the quality integrated virtual mobility processes that are needed, and how to prepare internal regulations that such virtual mobility could be implemented. And as I promised, the third most probably popular way awaiting Europe in the coming years is bilateral collaboration in formal studies, when traditional physical mobility can be not replaced but enriched by virtual mobility options. When a single university offers courses for students all over the world and in Europe to participate in an exchange program, to join their courses, but the courses are not developed in a collaborative way. I would say it's a loss, but maybe the first accurate step towards virtual mobility implementation. The problems and barriers for virtual mobility are still numerous. One of them is that still virtual mobility is not funded enough and properly, but to my knowledge, regulations are being updated and Europe already takes care and discusses how the process should be funded. And then, of course, the preparedness of the institutions, those who do not yet have experience. And the very last slides will tell you a couple of statements. I will share with you a couple of statements about how virtual mobility actually contributes to international collaboration. And all these statements have been reached through research implemented in quantitative and qualitative research after the experiences that I shared with you before. So there is data which is evidence that virtual mobility as international collaboration experience enhances internationalization of studies, expands learning environments, contributes to cultural, intercultural exchange, encourages good practices, collaboration, even idea sharing. It establishes interinstitutional trust-based relationships and solves problems of time, distance, and sometimes financial resources. Virtual mobility has impact for higher education institutions. I am not going to read all these bullet points, but all benefits listed here actually directly support internationalization and modernization of higher education as such. Virtual mobility has impact for teachers on the level of professional development, networking, exchange, and of course, transparency, recognition of teaching and professionalization, career opportunities, even research enhancement. And virtual mobility, of course, has benefits for students. This should come first, but we know that first institutions need to prepare, then teachers need to prepare curriculum, and then students receive the outcome of this preparation already. So students who participated in research, in quantitative research, indicated that they upgraded their transferable skills participating in virtual mobility. Also, they confront curriculum and study quality enhancement experiences, new learning methods suggested by various higher education institutions, transparency of learning, enhanced employability, intercultural international experience and expertise, enlarged academic areas of studies, new possibilities, of course, and support for being home students and lifelong learning groups, international study accessibility for physical and socio-economically disadvantaged groups. So this is my short introduction, and of course, I will be happy to discuss it further with you.
Thank you, Irina. You have very nicely shared what actually this is about and these three possibilities. I think now it's quite clear on the benefits of all this. I invite participants to set the question in the chat or their experience. But before we are going forward, the question for you, Actually, from your experience, how much students are interested in participating in such programs and developed jointly by more universities and in virtual mobility as such? Definitely with pandemic, we have experienced that the European Commission has said that blended mobility is possible because usually students went physically to some universities for one semester to get some new knowledge. Now we see that as it was not possible, more and more virtual mobility is present. And also the European Commission is encouraging the collaboration of multiple universities jointly to work on some programs. So your experience from your students and how you see this in the future, how it will expand.
We actually, in our university, worked a lot to explain to students and teachers what they may expect, what kind of support they will receive if they choose a course in a different university and enroll. And if their learning outcomes will be recognized and how they will be visible in their academic certificate. So we worked a lot with our students and we sent out many students to our partner universities. I think we were among the leaders sending students outside, and we see it as a very beneficial way because students are very eager to know about different ways of studies in different countries. We are eager to find out something that is new, something that is different, and maybe we find better offers in different countries, in different universities, and we want to try. So their experience was very positive. And when we had next round, they were happy. They were already peer learning from each other and registered for virtual mobility. But you have to explain and to work with your students very, very openly, preparing them for this new experience. It might, in my opinion, it's a very good way for students to test, to pilot studies in a different university before physical visit to that university or that country. And the same with teachers. Teachers enjoy working together, but they need time to understand, to accommodate themselves. I think we need to work a lot in order to prepare them and to explain.
Thank you. Let's move on and then we will come back for discussion. Our next speaker is Elena Calderola. So Elena, please, can you share your part of introduction now? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you very much, Irina, for a really interesting and insight view and framework for virtual mobility, talking about some projects in which Irina and other people were play a paramount role in order to produce and release them in Europe. And together with her, I was with my university participating especially in one project and other initiatives. And this one project I want to present today in depth. One of the projects that mentioned Irina, that is opening university for virtual mobility, and now this will be the topic of my presentation. I'm going to share my slide. Okay. Okay. So while Irina, with practical example for sure, but also gave us theoretical frames about the various types of virtual mobility, I want to focus on a specific project. And it was a joke just to say virtual mobility at work. So we can check, we can control how was going a project, the positive part, the trouble in this project, and the lesson learned at the end of this project. So the project, the title of this project was Opening University for Virtual Mobility. Opening University as a specificity because we will see, we will use a specific approach in the term of to open them, not only for mobility, but only for, also for tools that we were able to use in order to implement the project. In this project, Vitautas Magnus University, University of Pavia, Universidade Aberta de Lisbon, de Portugal, Universidad of Oviedo, was contributors, and KU Leuven was participating as a supervisor. So this was the general schema of this project, in which 4 universities produced the content and activities, and KU Leuven was the university acting as a supervisor and coordinator. Aims of the project was to design a master study program curriculum using open educational resource. So another time we can highlight the term open. So not only open university to collaboration in a view of international cooperation, but open university helping them in the use of open resources, open educational resources, applying correct licensing. So the idea is to use open resources that we were able to search and find on the internet, and then to reuse them to produce original product and to release them with a correct license. Then how to establish collaborative, trusted relationship. So please, each word is as an importance. To collaborate, not only cooperate, but collaborate in a project together in the same topic, more team. Trusted, because there was an agreement between universities, and relationship in designing the curriculum for multicultural exchange. And then how to integrate this open education, innovation in everyday practices. How can you see the idea was so wide and so ambitious in define the aims of the project? But I think that in some manner we were able to achieve the goal. And now it will be my pleasure to go on and illustrate you what we did. Of course, Irina, in her presentation, presented this declaration from European Commission of Virtual Mobility. I invite you, so this is the same declaration reported by Irina. I invite you, and I like your attention, on some specific and keywords. The first one is institutional level. Institutional level. So here the point is that institution has to be involved, and not only is not just a matter of collaboration between single professor in some free initiatives or some free exchange of students, but institutional level that realize or facilitate international collaborative experiences. So the first, institutional level, the second point, institutional relationship, and the third point, teaching and or learning. So not only or not at all exchange of ideas, of collaboration, but virtual mobility is about institutional level, international collaboration, teaching and or learning activities. So just to have clear the concept. The The benefit for institution, really, Irina was so perfect in highlight what are the benefit for the institution. And just I want to stress enhance sound competition between institutions. So the idea is we can collaborate with other universities, but we want to demonstrate as University of Pavia or KU Leuven or Padova that our professors, our faculties are very good in produce, realize, and in thinking such kind of collaboration. So there is good competition between organizations. And then, of course, when there is competition, the university has to open, has to be international, and as a result, the university will become recognizable. And as a result, it will be able to attract foreign students. So, as you can see here, there are some good benefits for institutions willing to adhere to such kind of approach. At the same time, for students and teachers, for example, for the student, linguistic competence, language competence, because the students are forced to go and to interact in a new environment with people speaking a common language, for example, that could be, for example, English language. And so maybe at the starting time, students are not so confident, but then in a second time, they take part. And at the end, they will be happy because this improved the level of English. This improved their cultural and intercultural ability to stay and to interact with other people. They will be able to improve their ICT level all skills. And of course, they will improve personal and social characteristics. Of course, all these kind of skills and abilities improved will transform at the end of the curricular studies in university in more career opportunities. We found in the project, we were able to identify some key success factors. Of course, no such kind of, how can I say, top-down level, but it has to come from a need to be more international, more collaborative, more intercultural. So the first point is it comes from a need. A lot of importance is integration of technology, should not be technical barriers. Because if this is the case, people refuse if it is so difficult, if the technology is not easy. The problem is that people refuse and prefer not to be involved. Of course, enthusiasm and effective teamwork are of a paramount importance. And the really point for a key success factor is the engagement of 4 levels: top management, institution, faculty and teacher, of course, student, but the staff. The staff have to be prepared to realize, to prepare the infrastructure in which virtual mobility will move. Of course, in a blended way, blended here is, we can think blended in this sense, partly synchronous, partly asynchronous, but there is absolutely the necessity of synchronous meetings. Of course, we can add here, if we think at the word blended, also with maybe physical presence. So the blend, the mix is always the better solution. A very, very important part we noticed in our project, absolutely of a paramount importance, is that everything has to be pre-planned and absolutely communicate to the student how the virtual mobility take place in the next month. Of course, teacher has to be trained and supported, and benevolent attitude and encouragement of the teacher, it's a matter of fact. Different cultures and different perspectives, of course, offer wider approach. From the point of view of the students have to know that they have to be particularly motivated. We cannot think about virtual mobility if we think about a student, a passive student, waiting that the professor will give the lesson. We need student with self-responsibility. We need student able to plan and organize their own learning process. We need proactive students. We need students with language knowledge and a bit of ICT skills. Of course, respect for diversity and intercultural differences, self-reflection capability. So, not only, I mean, the students have success in virtual mobility, but these characteristics have to be present. As Irina said, it is a bit difficult to introduce virtual mobility in institution, and in our case, also the use of open education resources, because these innovations are hardly mainstreamed and haven't applied in university studies. So we can be more confident for the next year, and we are, as Irina said, we worked a lot in this direction, but a lot of path we have to go on for a lot of aspects again. The reason, because innovation are hard introduced to the teacher staff, it is difficult. We are experimenting this now in the University of Pavia, coming from the experience of pandemia. People generally are love to stay in the same situation and not to learn more and more situation. The virtual mobility innovation needs to be introduced, as Irina said, to regular student exchange possibilities. Communication, organization, and involvement and inclusion are of a paramount importance in this process. And teachers should be, of course, trained on how to design open curriculum, how to design open curriculum, and how it will be recognized afterwards in regular university study programs. Okay, some steps in the project. In the project I work in, so in OUVM, Opening University for Virtual Mobility. Training material for university staff was developed on virtual mobility curriculum design using open educational resources and Creative Commons license. Staff from consortium universities were trained during 3 one-week short-term mobility. So staff were created in each university, and this staff, for the time of 1 week, worked in the different city of the project and received training time from experts. Okay, so this was very important to receive the training time, to receive the training materials and training period, and to create collaboration intra and inter staff from different universities. So in these ways, the consortium university were able to develop virtual mobility modules for a supposed master degree. Each partner will have to lead the development of 2 modules. In total, we have about 10 modules. Best experience from the partner, and it was realized that this master, a very important point, no new courses was created, but traditional courses were transformed from face-to-face to virtual courses. So we worked on existent courses, traditional courses in each universities, and the staff worked to transform it in virtual mobility mode. Very, very important here, that is institutional level, I want to highlight this, please, the last point. Participant students from consortium universities received ECTS. This was possible involving international relation offices from each universities of the partnership that agree in bilateral agreements, recognize this courses released for each university. So the idea was that students receive ECTS for attending this course. No specific virtual learning environment was created, but each institution offered virtual mobility courses on their own virtual learning environment platform. And a specific website was created to collect all the needed information and to serve as point of access to the virtual mobility environment of each university. So, staff training session, course development, intra and inter-staff collaboration, produced and released open educational resources on Creative Commons license, exchange of experiences and tuning, but the very important point in this list is the administrative schemas, because I want to stress again on the importance of institutional level. Administrative schemas so useful and mandatory for internal affair, for international relation office, and administrative schemas detailed and precise for students in order to learn them how to move, how to do in a framework of virtual mobility. This was the access point, the website that the students of Partnership University reached in order to choose the course. This was how can I say, each university of the 4 university produced course, and KU Leuven was a coordinator. Outcomes: all the modules were implemented. Each institution provided for internal calls, that is, each institution was committed to inform the student about these initiatives, provide for internal course, and to select students in order to foster their participation to the virtual mobility initiatives. Surveys for teachers and students were prepared and run, and about 60 students for institution attended to the programs, modules, internal and external students. Here in the slide, there are the addresses of the website in which you can reach the training materials prepared and the courses released. So each of you can reach how we prepare the staff preparing these training materials and the produce of the project, that is the courses released. Here are, in a nutshell, the courses released, just to make you. Okay, we are just at the final part, just some minute again, Sandra, just to show to the attendees the result. What were the students' expectations and doubts? In green, the expectation, the positive part. Okay, I am interested about the topics of the courses, and I am interested about this experience in open educational resource. Okay, I will improve myself in using digital technologies and in project work, in group work. This sound me good. Okay, it will be an interesting experience. And I will improve my level of English language. But in red, working in an international and intercultural group, I don't know. Some problem may be. using English language as unique and common language. Maybe I will not be so good as other participant, which will be my level of confidence in using English. Oh, there will be an intensive use of technological tools. I will be able to. And the problem, I am so good in order to manage properly my time, because we need, if you remember, motivated student and able to self-regulation of life study. Ex post evaluation. Great success in the cooperation, so the green part is positive. No problem, with digital tools it was easy, no barriers, fine. Both individual and group work were considered relevant, as well as researches, presentation, analysis, and discussions held during the course. But students would have appreciated more feedback on weekly group work released and presented during virtual meetings. So again, a great desire from the student to stay in touch with the teacher, with other people, in order to have more feedback about the work done. Students' feedback. Okay, we were able to achieve the goals of the course. There was a relevant improvement in English language. Perfect. Intercultural aspect and social relation coming from the course were much appreciated. Students developed more confidence in using digital technology. Students developed more awareness in their critical and reflective abilities. And from my side, the last point maybe is the more important point of the list. We are at the end. Overall assessment. 90% of participants declared to have positively modified their attitude to virtual mobility. So at the starting time, they were a bit with some doubts. The last slide, we are at the end. Lesson learned of this project. The main critical factors for succeeding belong to organization and communication aspects. So if we are able to well pre-organize, and if we are able to properly communicate and to properly involve students and teachers and staff, we can say that we will be able to avoid a lot of troubles. So this is really the main critical factors. ICT tools are now, more now than some years ago, easy to use and totally suitable for online education. So I really laugh when I hear also here in Italy, oh, distance education is not the same, has to stay in a room because there is not interaction, there is not the possibility for working group. Absolutely, this is not true. ICT tools are easy to use and totally suitable for online education properly. Virtual mobility, finally, will be totally integrated in higher education processes if during the curricular development, advantages for students and also for teachers will be taken in consideration and properly shared with them, disseminate to them. If not, of course, people will stay with the doubts that the better idea of education is to go to the home university and attend lessons in presence, or the unique form of proper internationalization is to have presence physically in another country. Finally, I want to say, Irina used the verb enrich. Absolutely, this is not the case to substitute physical mobility, but the case here is to enrich the mobility with virtual mobility, adding also this way who is so useful for student and professor for the motivation that both Irina and I tried to demonstrate during our presentation. Maybe I used some more time, sorry for this, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Elena. Very, very good example. I saw that people have asked for the link to web pages. You really clearly stated all the issues and things one have to think about when preparing such a program. I saw that prerequisites are motivated students knowing how to manage their own time. I would say it's much easier to write it than to achieve it, because sometimes students definitely are willing to participate, but on the way are not able to fulfill all the expectations, and maybe they have better picture on themselves than they are really. So something to think about. So in that way, did you think within the program to ensure some kind of consolation for students, some kind of mentoring part to help them to stay on the program and to pass all the obstacles in which they encounter?
Thank you very much, Sandra, for this question, because I have the culture that not only the best student have to undertake such kind of possibility, but all the students. So our duties is to support the student that maybe are not the best one. Just for this reason, the University of Pavia now is participating in a project calling Digital Passport and involving in how to help students during the phases of mobility. And one of these modules is cultural shock or problem during the mobility. So I am in trouble, I am in difficulties, I don't know how to, and we are prepared some capsules, some ideas in order how to support the student during the undertaking of his mobility, both virtual or physical. So the idea is to work also in this direction.
Thank you, Elena. Really, really good example. I think it can be a showcase to others how to do things. So let's move on. We are running a little bit of time. So next is Francesca, if I'm correct. No, we said next is Wim, sorry. So Wim, you are the next. Please, you have your 15 minutes to present introductionary the topic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sandra. Can you see my screen? Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. So my name is Wim van Petegem. I come from the University of Leuven. It has been mentioned already in this webinar. After the introductions by Irina and Elena, I will go and tell you a little bit more about one practical case where virtual mobility is applied in a concrete, in a course actually that is offered by my university and another university across the ocean in the States, Penn State University. And I will talk about virtual mobility in practice. Yeah, like I said, teaching on and for intercultural competences. Let's see how I can move to the next slide. Yes, okay. Intercultural competences are becoming more and more important, as has been said already, but you should see that in a whole complex of, let's say, new skills and competences that our students are expected to achieve when they graduate at the university. There is a lot more competences than just related to the scientific domain in which you're studying. This gives just an overview of competences that have been identified also by, let's say, the workforce, the companies, the organizations, the government, where our graduates will start working afterwards when they graduate. They expect that our students will have new competences related to the digital world in which they are living, related to a connected world, a networked world, an open global world. And so we have to prepare in one or another way our students for that new world, so to say. And that is what we would like to do with our course. In Leuven, the course is called Professional and Intercultural Competences for Engineers. My colleagues at the University of Penn State University call the course Engineering Beyond Borders. Okay, it's for engineers, but it can be applied to many other types of studies as well. But okay, in our case, we focus on engineering students. Like I already mentioned, it is important that we give our students during their studies already a flavor of what would it mean working in an international company, in a global world full of digital technologies. With different cultures. I think that this is an important aspect that I would like to emphasize here. So in our university, it is embedded in the postgraduate program on innovation and entrepreneurship in engineering. At Penn State University, it is part of the engineering leadership development program. Remember what both Irina and Elena already said. We talk about virtual mobility when it is really part of the mainstream activities going on in the university. So the course I'm talking about here is part of full programs offered by our universities. And so what are then the learning objectives? Well, I think that's a little bit beyond the topic of this webinar here, but especially we would like to explain engineers, what does it mean to work in international teams, in virtual teams? How can they actually, develop the skills that are necessary to solve an engineering problem, not just with engineers in the same room, but with engineering teams all over the world. They learn how to set up such teams, how to develop their own, let's say, skills to work in such a team. Also learn about the team dynamics, what's happening in such a virtual team, and how can they maybe also become a sort of leader in the team. So that is part of the let's say the learning objectives of the course. So it's about intercultural competences, the virtual team collaboration and so on. But we also would like to let them experience it firsthand, so to say, by embedding them in a virtual team in the course itself. So that is what we wanted to achieve with the course. The things we are teaching in the course are based on two books, which are quite well known, I think, in the field when you talk about intercultural competences. We refer to Hofstede, who is a Dutch engineer that worked in global companies for most of his life, and who then took the time to think about what are now these intercultural competences. I think it's debatable what he did, but at the other hand, I think it's an interesting resource if you would like to start thinking about intercultural competences in a global world, and especially in an engineering world. The other book at the right-hand side mentioned here is a sort of encyclopedia, Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands, which is giving for many countries in the world a sort of overview of things that you better know before you start working with people in those countries, or before you visit and start collaborating with people in such a country. Again, debatable because it's more like an encyclopedia, and it's generalizing things, and maybe there is some bias in it. So be careful if you read it. But at the other hand, it's also a good starting point for discussing when you work with people in other countries. Okay. That was about the books. Okay, the course characteristics is it develops about around 5 themes that we would like to address in the course, starting from yourself and your own competences and your own identity. Let's say how you then develop and work in teams, and eventually we end up with talking about cultures in organizations, in companies in general. Of course, the language we use is English in this case. That was taken as a sort of given by all the students. The format that we used in this course, and that applies to virtual mobility, is that we had in the first edition, at least, we had synchronous video conference lectures twice a week, and so there was faculty in Leuven and faculty in Penn State University that were actually giving lectures twice a week to the students, and that was then complemented with, of course, coursework, readings and case studies, also individual assignments and group discussions. And then the let's say another main part of the course is related to a project that the students have to work on. A project related to an engineering problem somewhere in the global world, and where we divided the students in teams, virtual teams, where there is students from Leuven and students from Penn State University gathered in one team and working together in that one team across the ocean. So they had to apply what they were learning in the course in different steps to the project that they were working on in that virtual team. Okay. Yeah, here is a few pictures. You will remember that's the time when we were having video conferences in dedicated rooms with dedicated equipment, and where we were sharing content all together. I think it's normal, and we also have to set that we sometimes interrupt the video conference lecture to allow local discussions with the students at both sides, just to make sure that we could also take benefit of the fact that students were still coming together in a sort of classroom context, and that we could also discuss our own, let's say, perception of what's happening and what was told in the course, based on how we could discuss that on a local level. Okay. The first run was in 2015, so long before Corona pandemic was disturbing our educational systems. Some experiences that students had with the first edition was that they liked it. It was interesting, they told us. It was relevant. But what they were saying was that having 2 lectures every week, where the teachers were sort of transferring their knowledge in a very short time into one video conference session, that was a bit too much. So it was, for them, it was heavy, let's say, to catch up with all the material that was provided in the video conferencing sessions. And so they were asking for more time for discussion. That was certainly something, and that it was at the same time also a bit difficult during the video conference sessions to already start collaborating in their teams, in their virtual teams. So they were asking for us to reconsider that. Okay, the teachers were also quite happy, and the one thing that we had to do was to overcome barriers related to different educational settings. For instance, the time zone problems, academic calendars was a very difficult one to overcome. For instance, this year, if we organize the course again, the American students have already started end of August, and we will start next week in Leuven. So there is some flexibility needed from the teachers to catch up with this asynchronous academic calendar, so to say. And another interesting remark to make is that, and it's related to the educational systems, but the grading, the assessment of students is also something you have to take care of, in the sense that in the US, students are expecting, for instance, high grades when they do everything what is asked for. In Leuven, we give only higher grades to students when they are doing extra work than what we are asking. So there is need to make sure that the grades that we are giving are acceptable at both sides of the ocean. So we have to think about that. And important was also to note that opposite to what the students could not do, actually, we had a chance as teachers to meet face-to-face before we started the first edition of the course. And that helped, of course, because then there was sort of trust relation between the teachers. We knew each other. We had a good feeling, and we became, even more than just professional colleagues. There was a sort of friendship between the teachers that also helped us to overcome all sorts of barriers that came across in the course. Okay, so after that first run, we started thinking about, okay, what can we now improve to accommodate the concerns of the students, and at the same time also to help us as teachers. And there we decided that a flipped classroom model would be a good idea. So what we tried to do then was we provided all the learning materials online. And we were fortunate enough that the colleagues in Penn State University could get sort of grant so that we could develop a fully online course that was giving all the concepts and all the ideas, definitions that we wanted to cover in the course. And we then said, okay, instead of 2 video conferencing sessions, we will limit it to 1, and it will not be a lecture, but it will be dedicated to a discussion that we could have with the students at both sides of the ocean, where we could then digest the learning material that they already studied before they came to the session. So that was the major change that we made from the first edition to the second edition of the course, and that was also helping the students to better digest the material, let's say. There was also some work done on the topics and what we wanted, what we learned from the first edition that we had to implement in the second edition. Okay, so the second run of the course was then offered in spring 2017. You might have seen that there is always a limited number of students. It's small numbers of students at both sides of the ocean involved in the course, which makes it also feasible for us as teachers to adapt to certain needs that might pop up and that we have to address. So in the second edition, it was so that in Penn State, they decided to even just stick to the online course, and there were no classroom participation. There was no classroom participation. Here in Leuven, we went for the blend. So the students were still coming to the classroom. We organized the video conferencing sessions where the teachers from Penn State University were involved, not their students. And so we tested out the flipped classroom model, and we tried to see how that could work in this format. Okay, and we saw that, yeah, this is a picture of the online course. It's offered by Penn State University, so there was no need to copy that course to the system in Leuven. We simply had access to the learning platform of our colleagues in Penn State University. So the students liked the online material, also liked the flipped classroom model, and they were also happy with sort of the discussions that we could have in the video conference. What they disliked a bit was that I was still, as a teacher, talking too much. And so I was sort of leading the discussion at certain points, but while leading the discussion, I was also involved in the discussions myself a little bit too much, according to the students. And then there were also some practical details with the course, but that is not important for the story today. So just a few quotes of the students. They were yeah, they would have liked to get to know the students anyway, although the participants from Penn State University were only online. That was not sufficient for the students. They really wanted to see their faces, so that there was a sort of contact possible with the students, and certainly in the beginning of the course that would have helped them. We forgot about that. I think that it was also important that students said that they were happy that they could still come to the class and meet their peers in the classroom, and that we then connected two sides all together. I will come back to that later, because in Corona that was a bit more difficult. So based on that, we went to the third edition, and now we introduced the blend also in Penn State University. So we had the flipped classroom model still, and then we had the students live in a classroom in Leuven and live in a classroom in Penn State University, and then we used again video conferencing, web conferencing actually, to connect the two sides and to really go into discussion not only with the teachers in Penn State University but also with the students there. So that was certainly something that students liked very much. We have to say that also in the third edition, it was becoming more and more clear for us that we had an international group of students, both in Leuven and both in Penn State. In Leuven, it was not just Belgian students. Same in Penn State University, it was not just American students. So we could also take benefit of the fact that we had students with different backgrounds. And therefore, we decided that at the beginning of the live session together, that we would like the students to tell a little bit about their background. It started because students wanted to say a few words in the language of their peers, but we enlarged that and enhanced that a little bit so that they could also talk about their culture. And students love to do that. They really wanted to introduce something about their own culture into the lecture, to such an extent that it even became an essential part of the course, and maybe in the beginning even a too elaborated part of the course. So we had to reduce the amount of time spent on that later on. But it was interesting to see how students were really enjoying the fact that they were learning about other cultures in such a life experience. As said in the third edition, we no longer were using dedicated video conferencing equipment, but at that time we shifted to Skype for Business as the tool that we were using. Okay. In the fourth edition, we moved again from Skype for Business to Zoom, and then there were not that much changes anymore, because we sort of were established with the course, and we were happy with the way it went. I think that this is now the sort of format that we appreciate, with a sort of flipped classroom model, and then live discussions with students. Oh, I forgot to say that in the third edition, it was no longer me that was leading the discussion, or no longer the colleagues in Penn State University that were leading the discussion, but we asked the students to lead the discussion discussion themselves. So because it was a flipped classroom model, they had to study the material beforehand. And we each time asked 1 or 2 students to prepare a little bit more than the others, in the sense that they had to prepare for leading the classroom discussion. So at that point, I was just a participant in the discussion, and I just enjoyed what the students were preparing as a discussion format. And I have to say that the creativity of the students was sometimes higher than what we could do as teachers. So we learned also a lot as teachers from how students were dealing with the material and how they wanted their colleagues, their peers, to digest the material during the video conferencing sessions. And so that's another aspect that we now still want to do in next editions of the course. In the meantime, we have had 5th and 6th editions of the course. There is just one thing that I would like to add here as a final remark, and that was due to the COVID pandemic last year, it was not possible for students to meet in the classroom physically, face to face, not in Leuven and also not at Penn State University. But still, we wanted to have a sort of feeling with the students that they could come to a classroom and sit together with the let's say the locals, and therefore we organized a parallel session to the main session for the discussion. And in that parallel session, we started, let's say, half an hour before we made the connection with the other side, and we let the students enter that parallel session just like they enter a classroom. And that was a sort of informal moment for the students where they could talk about everything. I also participated there as okay, I was the teacher, and so students could also address me as a teacher, just like they do when they enter a classroom and they have a question that they would like to ask to the teacher. So that was a sort of mimicking the classroom feeling, so students could come there from half an hour before the real session, and then we all together we moved then to the synchronous session with the other side, and when that was finished, we all came back to our parallel session with only the local students as a sort of debriefing moment, where there may be some local questions that students wanted to ask. Maybe they just wanted to say something about they wanted to share, and actually I have to say that this worked very, very well for the students. Yeah, that was for them, especially in the pandemic times when they could not see each other and face to face. For them, it gave them a sort of connection with the classroom mates. And I think that this was something that we also have to cherish in virtual mobility. If it cannot all be virtual, it can also maybe not all be face to face, like Corona was disturbing that feeling, but with that parallel session, the students could at least have a sort of feeling of belonging to the class, and I think that this was. I think it was important for the students because every student was there half an hour before the class actually started, just because they enjoyed that so much. I just want to give that as a lesson learned for myself, that you can do a lot virtual, you can do a lot blended, but try to also include that sense of belonging to a virtual team, a virtual class, and so on. I think that this is, there is in the slides that we will provide you, there is some literature that you could, we published a few articles about this program where you can see a bit more details. Okay, and that's the end of my practical example of how virtual mobility can be implemented in a real course.
Thank you, Wim. Really, really good. I especially like this part, how you adapted while pandemic and organized this for students so that they do not have such feeling of being alone in this situation. I think it's very valuable. As we are lacking a little bit of time, I'm now going to move on to Francesca.
Sure.
But if participants have any questions, please put them in the chat so we will answer them there. So the next speaker is Francesca Helm. So Francesca, please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting the presentation. Okay, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, and the slides are perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about virtual exchange as an instrument for the internationalization of the healthcare curriculum with some examples. And I would just like to start talking a little bit about the terminology. So I know there is one of the problems with our field is the many different terms that we use. And I think virtual exchange is perhaps a sub aspect, if you like, of virtual mobility. It's Elena and Irina talked about the institutional, the importance of institutional level collaboration, and virtual exchange can and should be institutionalized as well. But the focus in the literature is very much on the interaction part of it. So it's about the people to people, what Wim was talking about at the end, the students interacting with one another, this sense of belonging. And so it's this side of, if we're talking about student mobility, it's this side of student mobility that virtual exchange seeks to work on. So the definition is that it's technology-enabled people-to-people dialogues sustained over a period of time. So as I said, the focus is on the people-to-people interactions. And so we are simply using media platforms to enable this deep interactive social learning. And the interactions are very often facilitated to ensure that they are meaningful. So the idea of having students interact with one another over a distance, it doesn't happen automatically. It needs to be designed through tasks. But also, we found that trained dialogue facilitators are very helpful in promoting deeper level discussions, particularly on difficult issues on intercultural learning. And so again, it's like virtual mobility, it's not anything new. It has been developed over 30 years from experiences in different areas. So from educational exchange, it also has been used a lot in foreign language education, but also the dialogue focus comes from the field of peace building. So it is something that has existed for a while. The idea is to promote reciprocity, so reciprocal learning. It's not I'm teaching you, it's not unidirectional in terms of the flow of information and dialogue, but it's reciprocal learning. We learn from each other. And it's intended to allow for equity and inclusiveness. And so in relation to physical exchange, it doesn't need to blend with physical exchange. It can complement, it can prepare for, it can deepen, and it can extend physical exchanges if we need to look at them in relation. And it can also stimulate interest in physical exchange, overcoming the fear. I think Elena mentioned, students are perhaps scared of going abroad, this anxiety, but having an international experience online may increase the interest and lessen the fear. And so, again, to talk about why virtual exchange, I'd just like to focus on what students have said about this kind of experience. This is from a project which was about history, actually, and I think history is a very interesting field for virtual exchange, but what the student reports here, I think, is relevant to any field. Through this project, I was able to meet new people with whom I could exchange ideas and opinions. The subject chosen for this project allowed me, as a Romanian history student, to see another side of the discourse regarding these events. The events they were looking at was 100 years after the end of the First World War. So this is an exchange between Romanian and Hungarian students. And so the idea of, how national histories, they are very one-sided. So the idea was exchanging experiences and discourses about how historical events were being remembered. So the exchange allowed me to see another side of the discourse and made me realize that such controversial events can't be analyzed from just one perspective. Also, it helped me to refine my teamwork skills, but also time and task management capabilities. So we had content-specific competences and widening of horizon, but also these transversal skills that we've talked about a lot, teamwork, task management. A couple of other quotes from students. Again, it's amazing that we can all share our opinions at the same time about the same topic. It opened my eyes. We see this a lot, opening my eyes, because there are people from a lot of countries who've made me realize that my point of view is not the only one. I see the world from a Western European person point of view, and that is definitely not the only perspective. I could see that each country has a very different way of thinking than me. So again, I don't think, you know, we necessarily have national perspectives, though we may have national ways, national legal system, national ways of doing certain things. But I think what is interesting here is how through the exchange, this person has learned to her Western European perspective on the issues that they were discussing. And again, in terms of inclusivity, you know, student mobility is the privilege of, you know, less than 10% of the student population in Europe. At least we haven't reached the 20% that was the aim for 2020. And here the student says, you know, since I was young, I've always dreamed to go abroad, see the world, meet foreign cultures. I could never afford or participate in Erasmus mobility, but thanks to this, I succeeded in getting in touch with people around the world who I shared my ideas and thoughts with. Again, so this highlights the focus also on the person-to-person dimension. And so we've seen a lot of examples of virtual mobility. Here, these are examples that could be considered virtual mobility, but also with the virtual exchange component, so designing for the interactions between the students. And there are just two examples which I wasn't directly involved with, but I've come to know through my involvement in professional development for teaching staff and in my research on virtual exchange. So the first one, this was a project that was developed in the context of Erasmus Virtual Exchange, which was a pilot project of the European Commission. And it involved partners in the UK, Portsmouth University, and Sweden. And it was an exchange for healthcare professionals. And so the aims for the students, as defined by the teachers, Marta and her colleague in Sweden, were to improve students' communication skills, to raise cultural awareness across borders and across healthcare professions. What they were looking on was the collaboration of different healthcare professionals in the field. Practice communication skills in the digital era by exploring a variety of digital collaboration tools, and this was actually before COVID. Become able to identify barriers to effective interprofessional collaboration and suggest ways of overcoming them using real-life case studies. So the problem they had identified in both of the courses is interprofessional collaboration, which seems to be a problem in many different contexts. So the exchange was for them to talk about interprofessional collaboration in their respective contexts. And how were they to do this? So the actual exchange lasted 7 weeks, and it was embedded in the courses of the two colleagues. Okay, so it's an exchange which was kind of embedded. And they had to do individual and group tasks. And to facilitate the group building and the interactions between the students, they had some facilitated dialogue sessions, which were offered by the Erasmus Virtual Exchange project. So trained facilitators engaged the students in interactions before they actually started the collaboration and midway through the collaboration to see how the groups were getting on in their interactions. The students explored interprofessional collaboration in the different contexts, so UK and Sweden. And how did they do this? By carrying out interviews with practitioners in their local contexts. And then they created podcasts and videos to share this information that they had gathered with their fellow group members. So they used podcasts and videos to share knowledge of national health systems of the countries involved. And then in their transnational groups, they developed case studies to illustrate good practice in interprofessional collaboration to enhance the patient experience. So this was the collaborative task, developing the case studies. And through this, they could learn from each other's experience and extend their working knowledge between the countries and the systems. And this is a blog post on the university's UAC website by Marta Roldo, who was actually the Erasmus Plus coordinator for the School of Pharmacy and Biomedical Sciences at Portsmouth. And she says that she'd been engaging with Erasmus Exchange student mobility for over 10 years, planning for all these students to take part in summer placements with various partner institutions. But she came through the Erasmus Virtual Exchange project to understand that, the importance of also having online experience, virtual experiences. So this is why the title of the article, Why I Don't Believe in a One-Size-Fits-All Approach to Student Exchanges. And here she says, the challenge of presenting themselves and the topics they study via different communication tools pushed them out of their comfort zone and helped build their competence. Virtual exchange is a powerful tool to enhance students' communication skills and other transferable skills in the digital era. And then there is a quote from the student, but I've shared the link in the slide so you can read the full article if you're interested. Another exchange is, I heard about it from a colleague at the University of Padova, who presented it recently in a staff week. And this was led by the Western Norway University of Applied Sciences, with nursing department partners in Austria, Denmark, France, Italy, Madagascar, and Portugal. And this was a very new project. So it was actually developed in order to replace the lack of mobility due to COVID. So it was a recent project and developed kind of almost last minute because of COVID, though the Western Norway University had taken part in a COIL experience with the United States and with Madagascar the previous year. And so here in preparing for this exchange, coordinators had weekly meetings to define how many students would be involved, how they would facilitate the exchange, to develop the phases of the project, the objectives, the tasks, the learning outcomes, tools and platforms. So this is just to give you an idea of how intense the collaboration is in order to develop such a collaborative exchange. But this professor who presented the project recently said that despite the fact that they were all absolute beginners in this kind of experience, they managed through these weekly meetings to create a cohesive group and have a positive collaboration. And the numbers, again, are quite striking, because actually with 7 partners, they had 220 students signed up for the project, and they involved a lot of teaching staff. So there was 33 teaching staff in all. In Italy, the University of Padova involved 6 people, also with the idea of developing the competences and the capabilities of the teachers and the tutors in their experiences of facilitating and supporting this exchange. And so how it worked is that each university developed a theme. So there were actually about 20 different themes were developed. For example, technology and nursing was one, global health and intercultural nursing and communication was another, global health workers, global health and aging, road accidents. This is just to give you an idea of the themes that they worked on. And then within the theme, there were specific tasks and discussion topics for the students. So each partner university took responsibility for developing 2 or 3 of these themes and designing the tasks and the discussion groups, following, though, a similar kind of matrix. So there was uniformity in the design of the tasks and the discussion questions, but based on these different themes that each university was responsible for. They created 25 different groups, and each group had students from each of the universities. And their main tasks were to analyze and compare the theme in the different national contexts. They were supposed to draw on the literature on this theme, again, from the national context, and they were supposed to suggest strategies for improvement. That is, suggest strategies on how to address the problems that they've identified through their research. And so they collaborated again through 7 weeks through individual and group tasks. Yes, again, it's very similar to the other one. They carried out interviews. The final assignment was to actually prepare a group poster presentation and they shared this on a Padlet. Okay, so similar to the other one, they developed case studies to show the good practice, but they also did this final group presentation on Padlet. And as I said, the students learned from each other's experience and their knowledge between countries and systems. And so the positive outcomes of this exchange for the teachers involved, though, you know, it wasn't tutte rose e fiori, as we'd say in Italy, you know, there were some problems, some of the groups didn't work well. They were also doing their placements within the national context, so they had, you know, difficulties, some of the students, in finding time for this. But overall, it was evaluated positively, and they want to repeat the experience with additional partners. They also told me that they're carrying out focus groups for a research study on this transnational collaborative experience, which they hope to submit to the Journal of Nursing Education. And starting from the bottom up, so this started as a kind of grassroots collaboration, if you like, what they're trying to do now is see how they can integrate this experience in university curricula. Because also, you know, as Irina and Elena have both pointed out, it's still not mainstream. So we still don't really have mechanisms for recognizing this kind of transnational collaborative activity within our institutions. So these were just two examples related to the area of health, and I hope they were useful for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Very valuable examples. I think today we clearly showed what actually is virtual mobility and virtual exchange, with a number of examples, case studies proven to work well, showing the effort from the organizer part, you know, institution teacher, but also from the student part. What should they invest and how would they invest and why they are participating, naming the positives, positive results and some obstacles or some doubts students had during such programs. We are going over the time, but at the end, I'll just give you to summarize in 1 or 2 sentences. How do you see the future of virtual mobility and exchange? Will it become much more present in formal education, or maybe the informal education will be that where it can have a significant impact? So how present it will be in, for example, next decade? So maybe to start from Irina.
I am confident about the fact that blended virtual mobility is already in higher education in Europe in one or another form, maybe very, very first steps taken, maybe not formally everything correctly set up for students and teachers, but the concept already, I think, is in higher education. In the current decade, I wish that virtual exchange and virtual mobility is recognized for students and teachers as a part of formal studies, that students are able to have this option to select it and to get recognition, but teachers as well. And I think studies in higher education changed. The traditional system, when we calculate, when we plan studies, we need already to look from the new perspective. It only depends how much we want this innovation to be penetrating into our regular studies.
It's my time, Sandra. Okay.
Yes, I muted myself. Sorry.
Yes.
So thank you, Irina. Elena, please,
Okay.
your summary.
Yes, I think that in some manners, in the last years, a lot of movement arose in internet. From one side, massive open online courses, or such kind of other idea of using the potentiality of internet and technologies. In this field, also virtual mobility moved. I really think that one initiative from Europe, that is the one of European alliances, can in some way go in the direction of virtual mobility. That is the idea to create such kind of alliances between university in order to exchange courses. And I think that this kind of work together with different teams of different university will for sure foster another, how can I say, way of thinking, another setting from both institution, not only both, sorry, institution, professor, students and staff. So the idea is, like Irina, I am confident a lot of tentative initiatives are running. Maybe we have to work in order to refine, to precise, and to give the correct model. But I think that at the end, challenges from the future, first of all, the climate change, will push us in order to work more and more collaboratively in different teams, in creating culture, using different teams from all over the world. And this, of course, in some way will be recognized as virtual mobility. So I am confident that the movement will arise and will improve in the next future.
Thank you, Elena. And Wim, your summary.
My summary, I think when you ask the question like that, Sandra, I'm thinking at a certain moment we went from learning to e-learning, and now it's kind of obvious that the E is in the learning happening. So we are sort of back to learning, and we call it blended learning, we call it high flex learning, whatever. I think that just like that kind of movement, I think that virtual mobility will also become a sort of obvious part of our learning. At a certain point, we still have to do some efforts to include examples of virtual mobility in what we are doing in our universities. But it will become so obvious that this is integral part of what we teach and how we teach in the university, and how we want to learn as a learner, a lifelong learner, that we will no longer make the difference anymore. I mean, we will find it normal that we go to the classroom and meet our local peers, but at the same time that we also engage in virtual activities online, not only with our local peers, but with other students in other parts of the world, and make that integral part of our learning experience. Maybe I'm dreaming, but I like dreaming.
Well, thank you, Wim. I'm certain that all of us are dreaming, and this is what makes us moving forward, because only our dreams can make us do something better than we already have. So thank you. So Francesca, you are the last one, but not least. So your final words.
Okay, so I'm dreaming and optimistic, but I don't want to be too cynical, but I think massive steps have been made. So we've kind of overcome the technological barrier. As Wim said, e-learning is normal. We can take that for granted. I don't think we can take for granted, though, that we will have students collaborating, that they will be involved, because it does require a lot of work on the part of the teachers. And this isn't recognized. And a lot of universities, and Leuven is different. I saw you have fantastic support systems in place, but we don't have learning designers who help us design and plan our courses. What I'd really like to see in place is universities investing not just in the technology, but in investing in staff to support us in planning our collaborative courses, so that they really become collaborative in practice and not just on paper. I've seen a lot of institutional collaborations, and I think I don't want to be cynical about the European University Alliances, but I think that, on paper, they seem to be collaborating, but I don't know how many students are actually benefiting from these interactions. I've seen joint programs where, it's the 2 or 3 students who have the mobility. They have the joint program, but none of the other students experience it as a joint program at all. So what I'd really like to see is joint programs being really joint program, where every student in the degree courses that have joined actually have interactions with the students in the other university where it's joined. So, but it needs it needs support. We can't always, rely on teachers who are overworked, we're understaffed, and we have increasingly, teachers on precarious contracts. So I think, the university needs to invest in this so it can work from a bottom-up and a top-down perspective.
Thank you, Francesca. Yes, we need to conclude as we have passed already the time, but it was such interesting and such excellent webinar. I have learned really a lot. And I hope that the recordings will be watched by a number of people, because such good examples of practice and guidance and advices given in these webinars are really, really of great importance. So I wish to thank all the speakers for being today and for joining the webinar. I wish to thank the attendees, the participants, for being with us. This is the last webinar in this training part within the Child in Central Asia Education. So I hope that projects finish well and that you have the good results, and in maybe some another occasions to see you all again. By then, bye and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you very much to the speakers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.